The Type R is without a doubt Honda's hottest hatch, and while the rest of the world has gotten to enjoy it over the past couple of years, we've been pretty starved here in the United States. But that all changed with the introduction of this generation. And today we're going to be checking out the 2021 Honda Civic Type R with its 306 horsepower engine, a reasonable $37,000 price tag, and a whole lot more to love. And we're going to check it out, but first make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel. So now we're behind the wheel of the 2021 Honda Civic Type R. And first, let's begin with what could be the most radical thing about this car, that being its styling. This is without a doubt a very sort of love it or hate it design that people are split 50-50 on. Now, I personally like it. There's a lot of sharpness going on. If you look at the front bumper, there's a bunch of sharp lines, especially the intakes, which are actually functional, by the way. But there's a lot of sharp lines going around the front, down the sides. You see the side skirts and the flared wheel arches. Even the arches themselves have a sort of chunky look. They're not exactly molded. Nothing is subtle. This car completely abandons subtlety in exchange for a sort of radical sort of approach to things. But the thing that stands out the most is actually out back, because that's where you're going to find the enormous rear wing. And while I can tell that some people don't love the wing, I actually like it because it does the primary purpose, obviously, of looking cool, and I'm sure there's some aerodynamic purpose to it, but it serves to differentiate the Type R from both the SI and the standard Civic. There is no way you could confuse this car with anything else other than it being a Type R. And I actually like that because it definitely sits within its own lane. It's not related to anything else, at least on the surface. The extremely bright shade of blue certainly doesn't help because this car draws so much attention, and very much like the love it or hate it kind of feelings towards the design, it carries on to the whole car itself. I've met plenty of people that are fanatics of this car, Civic Si owners, which have been great, but I've also had people very clearly show their disgust at this car, and it's definitely something I've never experienced, someone feeling so emotionally touched by this car that they have to express their opinion in such a way. It's very, very unusual. But the radicalness also carries on to the inside, which we're going to touch on in a little bit, but you get the sneak peek that everything around me is red. And it's very, very much in contrast to the blue of the exterior, and it looks kind of crazy, but I like it. And like I mentioned earlier, all of the air intakes in the front are functional. You'll notice the one on the hood directly feeds air onto the engine itself, while the lower one serves to pass air and cool the brakes. Now, that's something really awesome to see because they could have just put some fake vents on there and just for looks, but they went the functional route, and I really, really dig that. So where's all that cold air going to? Well, it's to the 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine, which pumps out 306 horsepower and 295 pounds-feet of torque. Now, that doesn't seem like a whole lot in today's wacky world of horsepower, and maybe I've forgotten what 300 horsepower is, but this feels incredibly fast. This feels much faster than that figure would suggest, and I'm sure it has something to do with the 3,100 pounds this car weighs. We're talking about the same as a Golf GTI, which on the surface appears to be a much smaller car. Part of why it feels so fast most likely has to do with the way it delivers its power, because we're talking about a single turbo, a decent sized turbo, to get all that power out of the engine. It means it sometimes takes a little bit longer to spool. So what you have is an engine which has almost like two personalities. So down low, below, let's say 4,000 RPM, there isn't a whole lot going on, and the Type R itself is very civil. It feels much like a Honda Civic or Honda Civic Si, nothing out of the ordinary, totally daily driver friendly. Once you cross that 4,000 RPM threshold, then everything comes alive because the turbocharger spools and it hits you in a very aggressive kind of way. And the result is basically you're waiting, and then you get kicked in the back. Add on to that the sound deadening that isn't that existent in here, and you actually get to hear a lot of the intake noise from the engine. The lovely part about it is that Honda actually lets you hear the turbo spool up, so you can hear it sucking in all that air once it really gets going, which is great. Now, if I downshift, let's say into fourth, now we're closer to 4,000. You know what, let's go into third. So if I go down into third, and then I floor it, it's gonna be an immediate punch all the way to the top. Ready? So the result is that when you're going to floor your Type R, it's always exciting because it has a very sort of manic energy to it. None of it is smooth or linear or composed, which kind of matches everything else about the Type R. The looks, the interior, it's all a bit nutty. And that nuttiness is very welcome because what you're getting is a ton of personality. The Type R has personality for days. And I love that it's so communicative in the way that it delivers all its power, whereas some cars could be fast but very boring. Now, mated to that wonderful engine is one of my favorite transmissions I've ever driven. It's the 6-speed weighted manual, and the fact that it's weighted actually helps it feel incredibly smooth. All of the shifts are very, very easy to operate, whether you're shifting quickly or slowly. The throws are nice and short. Everything is nice and tight without feeling incredibly notchy or difficult to operate. And it's this very fine line between precision, but also having a comfortable, very usable experience. So next, let's talk about the steering in the Type R, because that's another great point. And the steering wheel itself is actually covered in complete suede. It's half red, half black, and it's great. There's a ton of feedback that comes through. I can feel all the vibrations and everything the front wheels are doing. There's actually a very, very good amount of good information coming through, and the result is a car that feels exciting but is also very communicative in the way that it sort of manages everything. Speaking of suede, let's talk about the interior, because I'm talking to you now from two red bucket suede seats, and they're very, very comfortable. They're nice and snug as well, but there's kind of something unusual, and that's that the rear seats are standard black cloth. Granted, they do have red stitching and red seat belts to kind of spice them up a little bit, but there's sort of the standard Civic seat. And it's when you start seeing these things that you start noticing where the cost cutting kind of was done and where the normal Civic begins to shine. So the rear seats themselves, there's absolutely nothing special about them. Other than all these sort of contrasting colors, the screen here is the same as a standard Civic, and the sort of layout in the center of the dash is very, very similar. Now granted, this being the Type R, it does get a couple of different driving modes, and down here there's a selector which you can select between Comfort, Sport, and then R+, which firms up the suspension, gives you a little bit better throttle response, and all that stuff that you would want from your sporty hot hatch. The fit and finish in here is actually pretty good. I mean, it's Honda. They know how to make cars, and they know how to make reliable, well-built machines. And the screen itself is okay. I'm so glad that it has a physical volume knob. I know before they had the touchpad, which is horrible. If you wanted to go up and down in volume, you had to really tap it on there. All of the AC controls are physical buttons. Only the sort of media interface and sort of settings of the car are in the actual screen itself, which is nice. Everything that you need to use or would like to use on a daily basis, it's a physical button, and then the other fine-tuning stuff is on the screen. I have absolutely no problems with that. Apple CarPlay is included in the screen, which is great. The standard Honda system is not the prettiest thing to look at, nor is it like incredibly intuitive. So a lot of the fine tuning for the car is actually done inside of the screen. So for example, this car does have automatic rev matching, which when I got into the car, I wanted to turn off almost immediately because it sort of messes with the smoothness of your shifts. And I had to go into the settings to actually do that, which I don't mind that because that's not a setting I'm going to be touching every single day. So having the physical buttons for the climate control and stuff, which is something you would operate every time you're in the car, is very nice. So it's not very buried in there. It's very easy to use. And that's the sort of benefit of sharing your sporty platform with a very mass-produced and well-thought-out platform, is that you get the sporty aspect of the car being nice and fun to drive, but you also get the well-thought-out interior and design throughout. So I don't know if I'm crazy, but it feels like the sound deadening in here is reduced. I feel like the standard Civic is a little more refined, and this car is certainly favoring allowing a bit of that engine noise to come in, which is nice. It's not sealed off and totally refined like a very luxury sports sedan, a car that has to do both. This one only has to be a sports car, meaning that it can focus on doing that task very, very well. And the result is that if you floor it, let's say for example, you can actually hear the engine rev up as I move up and down the gears, and if I give it gas, you can actually hear a little bit of that intake noise, which gives you a little bit of excitement. Now, don't get me wrong, there's a little bit of drama missing from this thing. All of the noise you're getting is coming from the front, but there's none coming out the rear. Even though you have those triple, like funky looking exhausts in the back, they don't really make a whole lot of noise. I don't think I've been able to hear them at all. You know, something like a Veloster N or something has a little bit of that extra drama that this car could do well with. I think it would definitely add up the drama to match up the look, the drive, the interior. I think that might be a little bit of the missing link right there. But overall, I love the fact that I can actually hear the engine functioning, and having that intake noise and the turbo spool noise and all of that only adds to the overall drama of the actual driving experience. So at this point, you might be wondering, well, how much is this thing going to cost me if I want one? And the answer is $37,000 starting for the 2021 Type R, which, well, I get it, it's a far cry from the $20,000 hot hatchbacks like GTI or something like that. This is so far above a GTI or a Civic Si or anything in that realm that it really does justify its price tag. And if anything, its price tag is in line with that of a, for example, a Golf R, a Subaru WRX STI, Ford Focus RS, that sort of lineup. It fits in beautifully. And I've driven a couple of those, and I pretty much would rather have this over anything else. And I'm very glad that even though this is a special edition car, the price isn't $50,000. And I think that comes as a result of it sharing so much with the standard Civic that they're able to add all of the performance goodies that you want without having to have a luxurious interior or super supple suspension that would elevate that price very, very quickly. The result is that you get to have a super sporty hot hatch without having to fork over a ton of cash for it. And I think that for the money, this is a fantastic package. And that's kind of the best way I could describe my experience with the Type R. I'm thoroughly impressed with it. And I'm sure that if you decided to put one of these in your driveway, you would be too. So what we have here then is none other than my favorite hot hatch I've ever driven. The manual transmission is so buttery smooth, the very manic energy from the engine is incredibly exciting, but not everything is perfect. And if the design is a deal breaker for you, I understand. This is a very love it or hate it kind of scenario, but if you do love it, then you could potentially be set to own one of the greatest hot hatchbacks ever to go on sale. And with that, I want to thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel.